No, well, see, there was a time in human history where females dominated, and then there was a male kickback to that, of course. So, you know, whenever any gender dominates, obviously it's out of harmony. Right? So the key is to actually work through our emotional injuries as to why one gender feels like it should dominate. So how many of you ladies feel that you're angry with men? Let's be honest, girls.
Generally or specifically?
Generally. Just generally.
I used to be angry with obstetrician. So a midwife.
Yes.
And that was because they made women do things that I didn't think they should do.
Yeah.
So, yes.
You know what, ladies? Every single one of you, I can feel, has anger with men issues still. So there were quite a few of you not being honest in that question. Right? Now, some of you have a feeling that, just general feelings like this. And I'll pick on the men in a minute. There's a fewer men, and we'll pick on the men in a minute. But some of you have feelings like this. You can't trust a man. If you trust a man, he'll disappoint you. Some of you have feelings of sexual issues with men. That men just want to have you for sex. That if you don't give sex, then they won't love you. Some of you have a feeling, and I'm just listing some of the feelings I'm feeling from you generally here. Some of you have a feeling of, if I open my heart to a man, he will hurt it. Shall I keep going?
Yeah. We'll all shake our heads if it applies, or go like that.
But the interesting thing is that you've shaken your head as a no in all of those statements, and yet I can feel every one of those emotions in you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll embrace that.
Thank you. And the reason why we often do this is because we tell ourselves that we're over things, when in reality we still really have some deep issues about these things. Let's look at our law of attraction. Let's look at the law of attraction as a woman, for yourself as women first, and then we'll talk to the men after that. What's your law of attraction? Do you feel you've attracted a loving man into your life?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you completely exposed everything within yourself to that loving man? Why not?
Well, I thought so.
Some things I want to keep to myself.
Why? Why? Because you are afraid. You are. I'm not saying it's not a question. The only in the end, like if you want to be at one with God, you are going to have to be completely honest and truthful and open, naked, emotionally, to your partner. That means no secrets, no withholding of anything.
Like buying a new dress and putting it in the closet. And he comes home and says, "Oh, that's new." You said, "No, I've had it for ages."
Yeah, like that. Exactly like that. Why do you say that? Because you're afraid of what?
Yeah.
Of what he's going to say. What he's going to say is what?
Can't afford that.
We couldn't afford that, you've got too many or whatever. And then what's that going to make you feel inside?
Guilty.
Guilty. And how, do you like feeling guilty?
No.
No, definitely not. So you feel that it's better to not say
Anything.
Right? Now, just that choice to not say anything means you have an injury with the masculine.
Oh, yeah.
You follow me? Just that one choice means you have an injury with the masculine. And that is going to need to be healed if we're going to heal this planet. You follow me?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's look at it from a male point of view. Each of you guys, be honest here, how do you feel about women? How many of you feel that women control you?
Oh, yes.
How many of you feel that women think they're better than you?
They don't gain the property.
How many of you feel that if you when you keep on giving to a woman, they won't ever let you into their heart? How many of you feel that? No. So there's a lot of these. These are the emotions I'm feeling from this group. All right? Different emotions that I'm just listing off. Now, if I have those emotions inside of me, then obviously I've got injuries towards the feminine that I need to heal if I'm going to be at one with God. That makes sense? And can you see how each of us can tell ourselves that we have no injuries? Right? We can do that, but this path is not about telling yourself fictitious things. It's about actually coming to see the truth about how I really feel inside of myself. That's what it's about.
And I can't do that without a relationship.
Let's say I'm not in a relationship. Do I want to be in one? If I want to be in one and I'm not, do you think I must have some injuries with the opposite sex? What's my attraction? Can you see what I'm saying? Like, if I'm saying in my mind I want to be in a relationship, and I'm not in a relationship, then obviously there's a discrepancy between what I think is the truth and what's actually being projected out to the universe. Because if I really felt like I wanted to be in a relationship, what would I be in? A relationship. Do you follow me? So there must be an injury that's causing this distance that repels the relationship. Does that make sense? So again, there must be an injury that if I solve that injury, if I go into how I'm feeling, and in the case of that, many times it is I'm feeling alone, I'm feeling unwanted, unappreciated, or those kind of feelings. And it will all be, if I trace it all back, because it's with a man, it'll be related probably to my relationship with my major male role model in my past, usually my dad. Right? It'll be related to some emotions there that I need to feel. Once I feel and heal those emotions, I'll automatically attract the relationship. So you don't go out to the pub every night to try and find a man. You don't go out to... I know, I'm just joking.
Oh, so that's what I need to do.
But you can be in a relationship and feel all those emotions too.
Totally, you could. But they won't be necessarily related to the masculine. They might be more related to the feminine, how you feel about yourself. So there might be different types of emotions that you're feeling. If it's related to the relationship and you know you don't have a relationship, then it'll be related specifically to the male. You follow me? So it just depends on what's going on with the law of attraction. Yeah.
If you're in a relationship and you express those emotions, how do you stay in a relationship?
Well, if I have a feeling inside of myself, right, that I'm going to own all of my emotions, and this is something probably that I'd like to just say to you too, there are three primary things that you're going to need if you're going to do this divine love path thing, right? Shall I call it that, the divine love path thing?
Sounds good.
Right. The number one thing is you're going to need to be humble. Do you know what humble means? Can I give you a definition? Humble means that I am desirous of feeling all of my own emotions, whether they are painful or pleasurable. So I want to feel all of my own emotions, whether they are painful or pleasurable. That's what humble means. Now you imagine in a relationship for a moment, just with that one thing. I come home from the day at work, the male comes home, and he says, today I checked out 5 girls actually, and I thought the 4 of them in particular, I could easily go to bed with them. So this is what he comes home and says to you.
And you'd say, why didn't you?
How would you feel if you're a woman hearing that?
Angry.
You could.
You could. Yeah, no, let's don't go down the could road because that's all intellectual. How many of you would feel hurt and angry about that? Quite a few, right? Okay. Now, if I'm humble, what would I do? I say I'm going to own all of my emotions, whether they are painful or pleasurable. If I'm humble, what will I do?
Feel it.
I might curl up in a ball in the floor and have a good cry. I'd be humble, feel those emotions of grief that I feel that my man actually projects his sexual energy to lots of other people during the day.
You wouldn't go through rage first and tear his eyes out and then
If I'm humble, I will never get into rage.
Just joking.
But you're right, yeah, it's tempting. Right? If I'm not humble, what I will do is get into a rage, get angry, want to have a fight, want to, why? Because I'm avoiding the feeling that...
You're hurting.
Why am I hurting? What's the feeling? My husband, partner, whatever, doesn't feel sexually attracted to me. What's my hurt?
Unworthy of being loved.
Sexually unworthiness, isn't it? Sexual unworthiness being triggered. Yeah. So as a woman, there's a lot of things being triggered if I'm a woman experiencing that. Now, if I'm humble, I will go into those emotions. If the man is humble, what would he do? He wouldn't say, "Oh, yeah, it doesn't matter where I get my appetite, just so long as I come home and eat here." He won't say that to you, will he? Because that's quite callous.
Jealousy.
Where would the man go?
Jealous.
Oh, I'm talking about the man who's doing it.
Oh,
The man on the
he's definitely
receiving.
not jealous.
No, he's definitely not jealous. He couldn't keep it stuff. What does he need to do? He needs to own his emotion as to why he actually feels sexually attracted to other women other than his partner. He needs to go into that. He needs to go into that and find some deep core emotions about his own childhood that cause him to have that emotion. Right? Now, if both parties in the relationship do that, of course they can stay together, can't they? But if one of them doesn't, then it's going to be very difficult, isn't it? Can you see how if both are totally owning their own stuff?
But that invariably does happen in relationships, though.
Invariably?
Not every relationship.
In ones that have got issues, you find that many people are willing to go to get counselling or whatever triggers to.
And what do they get counselling about generally?
About the relationship.
Exactly,
Yeah,
changing
not
their
feeling-
behaviour.
Yeah.
Like, and we're not talking about changing behaviour here, we're talking about releasing the causal emotion that causes the behaviour.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That rarely, if ever, happens.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah. And if that happened, lots of people would be dealing with lots of different things in their day-to-day life, and they'd feel a lot better in their relationships and a lot closer and everything as well, wouldn't they? Right, second thing, so that's the first thing, humble. Do you understand what I mean by humble?
Yes.
Making the choice that you really want to feel everything that's going on within you, whether it's painful or pleasurable. At the moment, the majority of you are very happy with the pleasurable ones, thank you.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the painful ones, how are you feeling? Do you really want those two? The majority of you are feeling at the moment, and this can easily change, but at the moment the majority are feeling, I'm not quite sure about this painful stuff, AJ, right? That's how you're feeling. Because how many of you know there must be some painful things inside that you've been bottling up for sometimes years, right? Yeah. Okay, so humble would mean experiencing it all. What's the next thing we need? The next thing we need, who doesn't like that word?
Love it.
What I mean by pray is I mean to have a feeling in your heart directed towards God that you want to know God's truth in your life. Now, notice I'm not saying pray to know your own truth. I'm saying pray for God's truth. Why am I saying that? Well, all of us have what we believe is the truth. Right? But the problem is, the thing that keeps us distant from God is that God knows it's not true. Right? So while I'm holding on to a truth within myself that I think is true, but it's not actually God's truth, I'm never going to become more blissful and happy when it comes to my relationship with God. Does that make sense? And ironically, I'm never going to become more happy and blissful in all of my relationships either. And you know why? Because all of your relationships were created by God, right, in the broadest sense, through these laws that God has, which are all based on God's truth. So if you don't know God's truth, then you won't know how everything works to help you be more blissful and happy.
When you talk about praying for divine truth, are you talking generally or specifically here?
Yeah, let's look at specifically here. Right? Let's go back and rewind us back to that little example I gave with the male. He's come home and told his girl that he looked at 5 women today.
Came home drunk, is that right?
No, not drunk. He was totally sober. If he was drunk, the girl would just say, oh, he was drunk, he didn't know what he was doing, right? No, this guy knew what he was doing completely. Comes home, 5 women he's checked out today, and he thinks they were pretty good. Now, if the lady involved in this prays for divine truth, what will she be doing? She'll be saying to herself first, all right, I know there's this law called the law of attraction. I've attracted a man who looks at other women. Now, why have I attracted a man who looks at other women? There must be something inside of me. If she's not already feeling her emotions, she could go down this track, right, of feeling there must be something inside of me that causes me to attract this man. Now, if I long to know what that is, I'm now praying for divine truth. If I'm longing to know what is going on inside of me that causes me to attract this event into my life, then I'm now praying for divine truth. And you know what? The instant you pray for divine truth, within a very, very short period of time, usually within an hour or a minute even sometimes, you will get it. If you really want it, you will get it. That's how God works. God wants to answer. Right? God doesn't want to keep you at bay. God wants to answer, but it's based on you having a complete and sincere longing. So if you long for divine truth in that particular instance, you will look very honestly at what's going on inside of yourself, because you know there's a law called the law of attraction that has attracted this man who's feeling this way inside to your life, into your life. Now, if the guy is looking at wanting divine truth, he would sit down with you and he would go through his own emotions. What did he feel when he was walking along the road and checking her out? What was he feeling in here? He will start being honest about that. And as he's being honest about that, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? He's really praying for divine truth at that point. He's longing to know God's truth, not his own, God's truth about what this situation is all about. Because if he ignored it and just said, oh, my truth is that I'm just attracted to lots of women, you know, you've got to sow your seed and all that kind of stuff. If he went down that track, he'd be in his own truth perhaps, but certainly not in God's, right? So what he needs to do is ask himself what is God's truth here. He needs to feel his emotions, look at the whole situation. God's truth may be that this man has no desire whatsoever for his partner. That might be the truth. Yeah. And he needs to face that, doesn't he?
Yes.
And he needs to look at why he's married a woman or in partnership with a woman that he really does not desire with all of his heart. Right? Or his truth may be even more difficult to access. It might be quite simple too. It might be that when he was very, very young, he never received any attention from his mother. And now the only way that he feels like he can be a man is to get attention from women. That could be driving. And he needs to feel about that. Right? There could be lots of different things that are driving him. But if both are praying for divine truth, both are longing for the truth that God would give them in their own heart, can you see how much simpler that would make the whole situation? Would we be fighting by this point? Do you think about the situation? If I'm humble and I've done that as well now, do you think we'd be fighting with each other if there's in a partnership with that event?
Wouldn't there be too much upset going for two people to settle down and go through this calmly? And
It's not about going through it calmly. It's about actually connecting with the causal emotions. I can guarantee you, if the lady connects with her causal emotions, she won't be feeling calm. She'll be crying about some of these causal things from it. If the guy does the same thing, he'll be crying too, probably, and they'll be able to work through their emotions that way and feel them, and that's fine.
Could you receive if you're in an emotional storm? Could you really receive a message from God? And that I would have thought the static would be too great.
No. It's through your emotional storms that you receive messages. That's where the truth is in these emotional storms.
What happens if only one of the partners is actually praying for divine truth and trying to work through their emotions and the other's not?
So let's say the guy comes home, right, and he says those things to you, and you get really, I start to feel really upset, right? And you say, don't you think there's something in that, Like, you're starting to feel your emotions, and you're starting to own it, but you're also saying to him, don't you feel there's something in that? And he's saying, no, I'm fine with that. Let's go to bed. Right? Now, if the lady was in her emotional truth, she would still allow herself to go through that process of connecting to the causal emotion that caused this attraction. Now, not only of a man who spreads his sexual energy, but now she's also got a man who's callous about it.
Oh, God.
So she's got two different emotions now that she's being confronted with. Now, if she allows herself to experience those emotions, right, in the end she can release the causal emotions within herself, right, that she feels to make her feel upset about it. And she can get to a point, actually, where she can actually look at the person with love and make a choice. Does she want to stay with a man? And it won't be based on anger. Understand? It won't be based on anger or resentment or any of the other emotions. It will just be based on love. Do I want to be with a man who's willing to project his sexual energy to others? Or am I willing to be patient and see whether he works through that particular emotion sometime over the coming months?
But when the woman works through her emotion and gets to that point, does that have a positive effect on the partner?
Certainly. Do you think her crying and dealing with causal emotions in herself, when she's not blaming him, she's actually dealing with all the emotions inside of herself about her child, do you think that, of course, is going to have an effect on him? He's going to come home a lot of nights seeing her crying. Right? What's he going to do? One or two things.
Walk back out.
He's going to get angry, isn't he? Or upset with her. Or he's going to what?
Say what's wrong, what can we do?
Exactly. He'll look at himself more closely. One of those two things, won't he?
What happens if he says, for goodness sake, get a grip on yourself, I'm sick of you crying and feeling your emotions?
So is he being loving to you?
No.
No. So why are you choosing to stay in a relationship now that's unloving to you? See, that's another emotion, isn't it? So you need to deal with that emotion. You've come face to face with the fact now that your husband or partner, not only is he looking at other women and giving sexual energy to them, but now he's really callous with you as well. That's what he's telling you. And why aren't you willing to face up to that?
So you say, why are you being like that to me? That's all about.
No. See, it's not about me asking him why he's being like that. Not at all. What it's about is acknowledging he is like that. Acknowledge the truth. He is like that. He is treating you badly. Don't go down the why. You go down the why, it makes you totally powerless, to be honest. Honestly. You think about it. Every time you go down the why, what do? You start to hope that he's going to somehow connect to something, don't you? Right? And what happens then? It is what it is. Right now, it is what it is. You need to either be in a state of enough love to deal with that, or leave.
With love.
With love. Either way. Deal with your emotions first.
That's
Have a big cry and do all of that stuff. And if he doesn't let you cry, you'll need to leave so that you can cry. Let yourself deal with the causal emotions of the attraction. Really deal with it. You see, a lot of times what happens in our lives, the reason why we don't allow ourselves to deal with our causal emotions is because we know that if we deal with them, we're going to change our life. And we're afraid of changing our life sometimes, right?
It generally happens around the same time. So you're looking at change and looking at difference and looking at acceptance, all that within yourself, as well as there are good things, as well as trying to work through the other things.
That's
so
right.
It's really, really tough.
It is tough. It is tough. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but it is simple. Because there's only three things you need to do it. But it's simple to understand, but it's not easy.
Oh, well, I'm just learning that I've spent about 2 years. I used to get very angry, thinking that that's not the way to deal with things. So this new age thing of you send them love and don't get angry at all I've done. I'm getting all these emotions that are coming up here.
Because you can feel while we're talking about it, some
twirling around inside me. Because instead of dealing with the emotion, I've actually squashed it more, and I'm wondering why, because I've been sending all this love and whatever, that I'm still attracting even more.
That's right. See, this is the problem with this New Age philosophy, is that you will keep attracting more of the same while you're not dealing with the causal emotion. It's actually the dealing of the causal emotion that changes everything. And it's not sending, this idea of sending more love is a fictitious state too, by the way. What am I feeling inside if I'm feeling angry? Is it love? No. Not at that moment, is it? It's angry. I'm angry. And I'm covering over, remember, I'm covering over some fears and all that kind of stuff inside myself. I need to feel them. That's the real thing I need to do. Not send them love. Feel what I'm feeling. If I feel what I'm feeling, I'm actually being love right at that moment. Right? And you don't have to send anything then. You're owning it yourself. Now, in owning it, I'm not saying your life might not change, because it certainly will change. Any relationships that are unloving towards you, you will eventually leave. Right? You will. You will automatically leave. So with myself and Mary, at the moment, I leave Mary every week, around about. Because at times the relationship is not loving. And at those times I leave. And I tell her I'm going to come back when it's loving. Right? And over the last four or 5 weeks, Mary's been very loving in owning all of her emotion now, and owning all of how she feels. And as a result of that, there's a much stronger attraction, because both of us owning our emotions is very powerful. Both of us owning our truth is very powerful. Yeah. So I'm not saying that any time you leave your partner it's going to be permanent. If it's permanent and you're doing it out of anger, is it love? No. So you've got more to work on there, right? If you're doing it because you're just so frustrated. Let yourself feel the causal emotions come up. Let yourself feel those and experience those. As you experience those, what will happen is everything around you will begin changing. And it will all change for the better if I'm dealing with the causal emotion.
What happens when those emotions are really deep-seated?
It's the same as if they're surface. Usually if they're deep-seated, we need to look at our fears that cover it over. And there's a discussion that I did a few weeks ago about fear being your friend. And fear is a great way to access your underlying emotions. Because if you notice what your fears are, then you'll see why you block your emotion. Right? So let's say I'm in a relationship as a woman, and I've not had a work job now for 20 years because I've had 4 children and brought up the children, but my husband's been off working, so I've not had a job for 20 years. And I'm really, I'm now dealing with some causal emotion with my husband, right? And it's bringing up lots of things, and I'm starting to realise actually that my husband doesn't really love me. So I've got to the point now where I realise that. What fears do you reckon might start coming up in that scenario?
Well, if you left, you'd have to find a job. You'd have to have some way.
How am I going to support myself?
Yeah.
That's a fear.
Where am I going to go and live?
Where am I going to live?
Rental properties.
Yeah, I've never done that for 15 years or whatever.
Can't go home to mum and dad.
No, because I've probably passed by now.
Yeah.
Right?
Education, training.
Yeah, what my whole life's going to change now. Can you see that? What are my fears that are being brought up? Now, if I live in those fears, I'm not going to leave.
No.
If I live in a state of truth, I will have to leave. If I love myself, I will have to leave. Right? And I'd be willing to experience every emotion of finding a new job, willing to experience every emotion of, every single one of those things that I'm afraid of. I'll experience. And do you think in the end you're going to be a much better person? Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Feel empowered.
Yeah, and it's not about woman power or man power or anything like that. It's about you just feeling connected with yourself so much now that you know you don't actually need another person. So relationships are not about needing another person. Relationships are completely about desiring the other person. Do you understand the difference? If I need the other person, I have an emotional injury within me.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If I desire the other person to give love, then I'm just in the state of giving love to that person, and that's the person I want to give love to. Relationships in the end are going to be, for all of you, at some point in your future, whether here or in the spirit world, are going to be just about what you can give to the other person. It won't be about what you get. Because you'll be in such a good state yourself that you don't feel like you need anything.
That makes you more attractive as well.
Exactly. Yeah, so instead of projecting a neediness onto the other person, what you're doing is just giving to the other person, and the other person now also has the choice they can make as well. Do they want to give, or do they desire to give in return or not? And that's what a relationship in the end is all about. But the problem is that many of us have these emotional injuries that if the other person doesn't need me, then what's going to keep him with me? Or if she doesn't need me, what's going to keep her with me? And so you see a lot of relationships being created where if the woman doesn't need something from the guy feels very insecure, or vice versa. Right? And the truth is, in the future, you will stay in your relationships just because you desire. Just because you desire that person. No one else, that person. Yeah. And it's a beautiful state to be in. What's the third thing? Notice I've put being humble and the truth before this part. There's a reason for that, and that is that if I'm not humble, divine love won't enter me. The reason why it can't enter me is because if I'm not experiencing my emotions that oppose love, then how can love flow? Right? So if I've got an emotion inside of myself, let's say I have an emotion of I'm unworthy inside of me. I'm unworthy to connect to God inside of me. Let's say that emotion is sitting there. It'll be sitting in this area of my body, by the way. So I might be putting on a bit of fat around this area here, and you know, things of having trouble down there, maybe with my bowel, or if I'm a woman, with with all of my feminine parts down there, I start having trouble. And what I'll be doing is I'll be saying to God, really, from my soul, I'm really saying, I'm not worthy to get your love. But if I'm willing to experience all of my emotions, then I'm willing to experience my unworthiness. Now, the instant I do that is the instant now that God's love can flow. Because I'm now willing to stop blocking the flow of love.
Excuse me, could I just... what I've been doing since viewing your DVDs is praying for divine love and asking through the Holy Spirit that my barriers and my blockages to receiving divine love are either dissolved or there is some way that I can identify, given me some way to identify. Can't you approach it that way, right?
So, well, that's the same thing.
I thought I was putting the cart before the horse.
The barriers to divine love are all here.
Yeah.
Right? And here. My inability to accept the truth in my life and my inability to experience all of my emotions. That's my barriers. So when I'm having a longing to God to show me my barriers, I'm not receiving divine love at that point. I'm receiving divine truth at that point.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm wanting divine truth.
I'm asking for love. I'm asking for both at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. So what you're doing is asking for all three in that one prayer, if you like. Yeah. But to really ask for it, you've got to live it. It's not just a matter of just saying those words in your mind. It's now when a situation hits you in the face, which they all do generally, because we're in a state of error, so all of the truth hits us in the face generally, we're surprised. So when that issue hits us in the face, it's a matter of facing it, right? Of actually coming to terms with it, being humble and experiencing it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's good. All right, so does everyone understand what this is now? This is longing to God, directing a longing to God for divine love, for God's love to enter you. Just having an open longing for that. Now, if you have an open longing for that, every time you receive divine love or every time you receive divine truth, you will have an emotional experience probably. Sometimes they will be a lot of times, and more often, they'll become more and more joyful experiences, where you are overwhelmed with joy, with tears of joy.
Yes, I've experienced.
Or you're overwhelmed with it. Now, when you receive divine truth, you will often also, if you're humble, you'll be releasing error. And when you're releasing error, you'll be overwhelmed with tears of grief. And that will also be part of the process as well. Right? And because we're choosing all of our own emotions, we're going to let ourselves be overwhelmed no matter what the emotion. Yeah. It might be grief, it might be, it might be unhappiness and grief and sadness and terror and fear and all those emotions are all on the side that we're experiencing that are painful, and what we'll need to do is allow ourselves to feel that. Then on the pleasurable side there might be all sorts of other emotions, desire, longing, even sexual longing, all those other emotions that we haven't allowed ourselves to feel completely. And we need to let ourselves experience